Hey Janelle, how's it going?
Hi, Luke. Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing pretty well this week, I think. So thanks for making an appointment with us at our writing center. Uh, I see that you emailed me your document and I got it opened up over here. Did you want to start by talking about it a little bit, or what your aims are and goals are for this?
Sure. So, this document is actually a written transcript for a presentation that I'm going to be giving next week. I'm going to be on a panel for a webinar, and I am talking about synchronous consulting. And so, this is a written transcript for
Hmm.
a presentation that should be about 10 to 15 minutes. And so, I put a comment up on the side over there in my document. Those are the instructions that I got in terms of what my presentation could focus on in relation to synchronous consulting. So she had said it might be best practices for how Writing Center administrators can implement synchronous tutoring. I can discuss best practices, pitfalls to
Hmm.
avoid, or tips and tricks, and I can just decide what I want to talk about. So
Okay.
I'm kind of concerned with my organization and what I've decided to talk about and how I have organized it.
Okay. Awesome. Before we get any deeper, do you have any questions about the video technology we're using or Google Docs right here?
No, I am familiar with Zoom and Google Docs.
Excellent. Do you mind if I make comments on your document as we talk, just so
Oh,
we know what?
that's perfectly fine. I'm a very visual learner, so I like the notes, and I use highlighting all the time in my own writing, so that's very helpful to me.
Awesome. Do you mind if I reply to this document, to this comment up here on the right? I might use that to make some agenda items for us.
Yes, that's perfectly fine.
Awesome. So why don't you tell me exactly what you're concerned about with the organization, or what you're worried? First, maybe tell me a little bit about how you've organized it, and then maybe tell me a little bit about why you think that might not be working, and I'll make some notes here that might give us some direction on where to look.
Sure. So I've kind of taken the approach of in in my presentation, I want to help other Writing Center administrators be able to design training for synchronous consultation. So to be able to train their synchronous consultants. And so right now the structure is that I have organized everything around learning outcomes for what should the learning outcomes for synchronous training. I think I forget how many I have. I might have about 4 or 5 right now. And then so my headings are the learning outcomes. And then under each learning outcome, I've kind of explained why that should be something that the consultants need to learn. And I suggest some training exercises that could be used to help um, consultants actually meet those learning outcomes. And so that's how I've organized it currently. I did have a section that talked about how to choose appropriate technologies, like how to choose a video meeting or text sharing technology for a synchronous consultation.
Mhm.
But it was a pretty big section. And as I kind of read through as like a test run, I was way over time by having that section in there. So I'm kind of torn because I feel like that information is pretty important. But I also think that talking about the learning outcomes and the exercises is important as well. And so I
Right.
don't know if it's even possible for me to talk about both or if I need to take a different organizational strategy.
Okay. So the primary concern seems to be how to balance some of these other things. Um, could you remind me real quick, just restate what the larger section was particularly about?
The larger
You had an additional section, right?
Yes, that section had been about how to choose a technology, how to choose a
Hmm.
synchronous platform, like what features you might want to look for, like desired features in a video meeting platform or a text sharing platform was
Okay.
originally what that section had had.
And your time is 15 minutes, right?
10 to 15.
10 to 15.
So closer to 10 is probably where I want to hit.
Okay. And so your primary worry to me sounds like, as you said, being torn between whether to include these types of things in your organizational structure here, or with the or just narrow your focus down to these learning outcomes. Is that it?
Yeah. And I also wanted some help with wording the learning outcomes as well, just how to word them, because I don't have much experience writing learning outcomes.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to make another reply here. So, do you want to start by focusing on the wording of the learning outcomes, or talk through a bit about what could be included here from the platform choices, if
So
anything?
I'd say we could start on the wording of the learning outcomes, and then I can kind of generally tell you what I plan on talking about within each of those outcomes. And so that might help me to think about whether or not that's the best organizational strategy.
Right. Right. And then, so first, what we'll do is we'll take a look at some of the wording of the learning outcomes, and we'll see exactly what you might be worried about, or see if there are other ways to make it perhaps more clear or more communicative about what's going on. And then we'll take a look at some of the organizational structure and see if there's any way to fit in some considerations, or maybe like a quick list of things to consider when choosing a sync platform. I think there might be a way to fit something small in there,
Okay.
or even just point them to other resources that could help them in that direction.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yes, that sounds good.
Perfect. Are these learning outcomes down here highlighted?
They are. Those are the learning outcomes as I have them right now. So those are the main headings in my document currently.
Awesome. So is there any one in particular you want to start with?
If we just start from the first one and move down, I guess just tell me if they make sense to you, or if the wording works in terms of how a learning outcome should
Okay.
be worded.
So would it be helpful, maybe one thing I could do is, as you read them to me, I could try to restate what I think these sections are going to be about. And if I am on the mark, that might be a sign that it's clear. If not, maybe we can sort of reword it.
Okay. Yeah,
Sound
and I
good?
know that with learning outcomes that they need to be worded in a way that you can actually measure them in the
Right.
system, and so that's also what I'm having difficulty with, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so let's start with the first one.
Okay, so learning outcome number 1 is demonstrate, that should be proficient. Demonstrate proficient use of the technology platforms.
All right.
If I could proficient, that would be helpful.
And so does this, I can't spell proficient either. So does this seem like something you could easily measure? What do you think?
I think so. I think you could measure whether someone is proficient in the technology platform that you're training them on.
Okay.
I think so.
Could you, maybe one way to test this might be, how would you measure this if you were designing training?
Yes, and this is a good discussion, because that's kind of what I talk about within each of the sections.
Right.
So the training exercises that I talk about for this particular learning outcome, I talk about how it's a best practice that online training should actually take place online, so that the consultants are having to use the technology platforms in training that they're going to be using when they actually work with students. And so all of the activities and things they would be doing in online training would take place through those platforms. So you could tell by their use, how they're using the technologies to complete those activities, or how they're using the technology in a mock consultation. You would be able to tell whether or not they are proficient or have proficiency in that.
Okay. And the way you would note that is note some of the practices we utilize in those technologies, and then see if they don't utilize them. Is that sort of the idea? Or they don't utilize them according to training?
So I think, and this is an area that I'm struggling with, so learning outcome 1 does kind of overlap with learning outcome 2, or I don't know whether or not they need to be differentiated. So in the first learning outcome, when I'm talking about proficient use of the platform, I mean, that they know how to get into the video call space, they know how to turn on their video, how to tell somebody else to turn on their video, that if somebody's trying to maybe call in from their phone, that they know that that's a feature and how they go about doing that. So it's just that they generally know how to navigate the space and use it for basic reasons. learning outcome 2 is focused on applying multimodal strategies
Mm-hmm.
with flexibility and creativity. So that's about actually saying like, okay, we'll do highlighting, or we'll type notes up in comments, or we'll revise in this way. And
Okay.
of course, those strategies take place through the technology, so they do kind of overlap in that way.
Right. I want to go ahead and sort of highlight these in blue to sort of indicate that we're unclear whether or not they fit together or they should be separate things while we talk it out.
Okay.
So the way you had described it to me, it was like there is in some ways a slight difference between these two. I don't know how substantial it is to warrant two different learning outcomes. It might be. But where the first one is proficient use of being able to access and engage in the technology at a level of can they use it well enough, right? Can they get in? Can they open up a doc? Can they access an email? Can they tell someone else how to do these things? Whereas two seems to be operating with them in flexible and complex ways to get across or communicate writing center strategies. Or does that sound
Yeah,
right?
I would say that's about right. So like the first outcome is, okay, you know how to use the technology, like you know how to get into a Zoom room and generally how Zoom works.
Mm-hmm.
Learning outcome 2 would be, you know how to utilize Zoom to for learning purposes, to
Right.
aid someone in learning. And that
Okay.
requires not only knowing the technology platform, but knowing which features to use in which contexts or situations or
Right.
of learning needs.
Yeah. So one is knowing the technology. Two is knowing how to use the technology to teach someone else something. So knowing when and where to use certain aspects of the technology. Yeah,
Yes, that is
I think that's an important difference. I agree. So
because
and I think
under learning outcome 1, that's really where I talk about how I think that online training should take place online for the purpose of it helps the consultants become proficient in using the technology, and that they have to use them to complete all the activities of training.
right. Okay.
So that's because that was another section that I had kind of had on its own, and I took it and I kind of built that explanation under learning outcome 1. That the section about how to choose technology platforms, I have also moved that under learning outcome 1 and kind of explaining.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be a good. So that's good because I like that because what that does is that combines both like what you would do. It combines those decisions of how to measure proficient use of technology with, well, what are the things that technology can even do, and that can get you into platform choice in a way that doesn't require a whole separate category. So
Yes, and then
right.
and
Yeah.
I don't think that I'd really be able to combine them, like combine learning outcome 1 and 2, because I'm already talking about two separate things within learning outcome 1 already. And then
Right.
learning outcome 2 gives a lot of examples of multimodal strategies. So I feel like they both already have a lot of content that
Mm-hmm.
it would be too much to try and combine them.
Yeah, I think with the difference in focus, especially like the way you've articulated it in is do they know what the technology can do versus do they know how to use the technology? And also making one a space for talking about certain decisions that could be made in platform choice and how that affects the way you would measure these things. Um, I think you're right. I agree. I think it would be good to um, keep them substantially different. Um, and with the way I think I came across and grasped these um, learning outcomes as they're stated with your explanation, I think both of these are pretty clear.
Okay.
I don't think there's a whole lot like I think the multimodal strategies and the flexibility part distinguishes it from the mere technology aspect, and the platform mention here does a good job of refocusing us on specifically the tech rather than the strategies to be used within the tech. You know what the platform is rather than what it does. Um, I think that's useful. So I don't feel as though I would be confused about how you would measure both of these things. You know, so um, yeah. So do you have any other questions about these two, or do you think?
No, I think that that makes me feel better about those two. So thank you.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and highlight these in green to note that we nailed it.
Okay.
Bam, did it. All right. On to the next yellow for unsure.
Yeah, so learning outcome 3 is assist students with troubleshooting and using the technology. And I've played around with the wording on this one. Originally, the wording was solve technology issues as needed or troubleshoot technology issues. And so I reworded it so that the focus was on the verb assist. So
Yeah.
you're like assisting somebody else with troubleshooting, because it's perfectly possible that there will be a technology issue and you won't know how to solve it. So it's about being able to assist somebody else with trying to figure out what
Right.
the problem may be. And I was
And
also trying to account for how you might assist somebody else with understanding or learning the technology. And I don't know if I accomplished that with the last phrase.
all right. And so we have troubleshooting, which is the mere issue, right? Or the mere fact that someone might be unable or having issues accessing the tech that you're utilizing for your online consulting practice.
Mhm.
And then it's using the technology. And so when you say using, what are you looking for here?
I think I'm trying to say assisting students with troubleshooting technology issues, and also assisting them with just knowing how to use the technology. So if somebody didn't know how to use Google Docs, then I would need to assist them in learning how to use it or understanding how to use a certain feature of it. And I don't really know how to account for both of those things in this learning outcome.
Right. So I think it's very clear that to me, both the first half, right? I don't think that's that one. I mean, you would measure and can they help someone else with a technology issue, right? So I can imagine something like maybe a mock or something like that where someone is encountering an issue. What would be interesting, maybe the term assisting students with troubleshooting and technological literacy, would that get across something? Would you think that would be useful for your audiences? Because like that would imply both like knowing how to use technology, but also being literate and applying it in a different context. So getting someone literate in the platforms that they're using.
I like that wording a lot better.
So yeah, do you want me to go ahead and change it, or do you want to
Yes,
revise it?
yes,
Okay.
please. I forgot the wording that you used, but I liked it.
Yeah. So I just had technological literacy, and you can revise that or edit that however you think.
Okay. And do I need to clarify here, like with troubleshooting, do I need to say like troubleshooting technology issues? Do I need to clarify what they're troubleshooting?
For me, I wouldn't say so, but that would depend on your audience, right? Do you think that your audience, I mean, because I'm in a synchronous consultation right now, so like I would understand what troubleshooting is. But do you think that in your webinar, it could be easily assumed? If in doubt, I would always clarify just to be safe. Oh, thanks, you caught my capital.
You love to capitalize things that shouldn't be capitalized.
It's very true. It's a common occurrence. Person I don't know. And so troubleshooting maybe technology. I think it would be good to clarify just in case. That might be something to keep in mind.
Okay. I'm going to keep that one in yellow, and I'll play around with the wording on that one.
All right.
Later.
I like that. All right. And number 4.
Okay. So learning outcome 4, I don't know how to word it at all. So right now it just says consult over text chat with effective practices, which is very vague and doesn't really say anything. But what I'm trying to say is that for a synchronous consultation, text chat needs to be a backup because the audio and the video will fail. And if that does fail, the student should still be able to have that consultation and continue in another method, which may be text chat. So in my training, I always taught the consultants not only how to consult verbally over video, but also how to consult over text chat, which is a separate set of strategies, because now you're having to
Mhm.
consult through writing. You're not going to get as much done. It's going to
Mhm.
take longer to communicate. You have to be much clearer about what's happening in the session and clarifying that
Right.
in the chat. So it's kind of it's an
Mhm.
additional set of strategies. And so there needs to be something about text chat and this learning outcome, but I don't know how to
Mhm.
word it. I don't know what verb to use.
Right. So the idea is that training would always have to have in mind the possibility of having to do a consultation over a near synchronous texting, like a messenger or like some sort of technology like that, right?
Yeah, some kind of text
Um,
chat.
so utilize text chat effectively in consulting. Do you want to give that a shot? I don't know how that looks. In consulting? Yeah, or like, because the key focus is not necessarily, the key focus is being able to use that particular tech, right? It's that strategy in particular that requires a different set of skills, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I like where that's going better than what it
yeah,
was, and I'll keep playing around with it.
yeah. I do like the start of utilizing text chat there. I think
Yeah,
that's a little bit better than consult.
yeah, I
Um,
like that too. I like
mhm.
that better.
All right. Do you want to talk about that one more? Or do you want
We can move on to the next one, I think.
to? Okay.
So, learning outcome 5 is navigate between various communication methods.
All
And I
right.
don't really know if maybe this should be combined with learning outcome 4 or not,
Mhm.
perhaps. But this just means that, not only do you need to know how to do a synchronous consultation that's verbally over video, and not
Mhm.
only do you need to know how to do a synchronous consultation that's only through text chat, you need to be able to move back and forth between those communication methods, possibly within the same session, because the first half of that session, the video might be working and then it
Right.
fails, and then you have to transition to text chat for the rest of that session. So you're having
Mhm.
to navigate between different communication methods within one session. And I
Mhm.
do think that that is a separate or additional skill.
Right. Um, I like the way you phrased it, as because like the paradigm case you seem to be imagining is someone starting in a synchronous video chat like this, right? And then the video cuts out and we're forced to utilize like a chat feature in Zoom, what we're using right now, for example,
Yes.
or something. And so I think you're right that maybe these can be um, uh, combined for, so these two right here, um, you can maybe do something like navigate quickly between various communication methods, including text chat, right? And so you can place a primary focus on why it's important. You can note that it's important to focus on text chat because there's like a particular set of skills that come with that, and that's the most common thing you're going to navigate to in a time where you need to troubleshoot. Um, but it also gets across that there are multiple methods, so that would give you um, a very specific goal in mind, but also um, a measurable, a varied, a necessity to learn something varied as well. And I think that would be something that you could do pretty easily, bringing them together. What do you think?
I Now that I'm talking aloud about it, I don't know if they could be combined, because navigate in the fifth learning outcome, the verb navigate means that you're being assessed on whether or not you can go back and forth and kind of make decisions as to different communication methods,
Yeah,
where in addition, it's not only that you can move to
right,
text chat when you have to, but that you can apply the effective practices for text chat specifically
right,
that are different than verbal based consulting.
right. They're different. You're measuring different things in both of these categories.
Correct.
Right. Good. Well, then we probably should keep them separate then.
Okay. So then it works to keep them separate.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably better. I mean, because then it also gives you more space to talk about the specific practices you're measuring.
Okay.
Right. But I didn't see anything. I wasn't confused by number 5. Number 5 didn't seem to like, unlike with number 4, where is it specifically focusing on text chat practices, you know. Number 5, it's very clear what you want them to be able to do. Maybe because one thing you did notice, you noted you wanted to measure that wasn't in here, is can they do that quickly internal to a session, right? That seemed to be something you were primarily concerned about measuring, was could they go in the same session from one communication method to another? And you were probably maybe concerned about the technology difference or the platform difference too, right?
Yeah, and I would say that's accounted for with the navigate, that you're navigating between the different methods. And then once you're in a text chat consultation, then you know how to utilize text chat effectively.
Okay. Because for me, methods doesn't necessarily speak to the part that you're concerned about, which is a difference in technology, the difference in the modality from like a video technology to a text technology.
So I was looking at it as it's a difference in the way that we're communicating, and so originally it said navigate between verbal-based and text-based communication.
Okay.
That's what it said originally, but I reworded it to be more inclusive, because that assumes that everybody can do both verbal-based and text-based communication or navigate between them, and that's not accurate.
Right.
So I made it more broad so that it could be more inclusive.
Okay. Yeah, and then I think about it, it also would be really weird to set it up in such a way that assumes it would only go from video to text rather than from text to video. Yeah, now that you've explained it, I think I like that. So that was the only thing I was interested in, is why you chose methods over tech.
Okay. Yeah, and I can further explain that when we get to that learning outcome in that section. Right.
But I think these, I think with the exception of still working with something in 3 and something in 4, 5 seems pretty clean to me, if you want me to go ahead and say we nailed it.
Yeah, I think that works.
Oh, that's the font. Did it. There we go. All right. 3 out of 5 ain't bad.
Yeah, that's pretty good. No, you definitely gave me ideas for how to move forward, how to approach the wording a little bit better, so I can play around with that on my own.
Awesome. So did you want to look at some of the sections in here, or did you want to look at, talk about some of the other organizational concerns you might have had?
So I guess just as I've been explaining it to you, does it make sense that the main sections in this transcript are all just focused on the learning outcomes, and then within each of those learning outcomes I can address multiple types of issues, including choosing technology platforms, valuable features, effective multimodal practices, and of course training activities.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when I design a course, for example, I usually start with what the learning outcomes are and build out from there.
Yeah.
So to me, this seems very intuitive. If you want to design a training course or training, you want to figure out, well, what do you want them to learn? So for me, this seemed very clearly pointed to me how you were going to go through this, how you were going to measure it. There were a few things, of course, in like 3 and 4 that were a bit, a little unclear, as we talked about, internal, but the concept itself doesn't seem out of place. I mean, it seems like a very intuitive starting point for me, and I would say perhaps for other instructors as well. If I wanted to do this, where would I start? What do I want them to learn?
So, well, you said, I'm glad that you phrased it that way, because that's exactly what I was going for, is that you need to start with the learning outcomes and work your way out. So that's why I started here. And I think for anybody who maybe hasn't had any education training, like I didn't have that I didn't know originally that I should start with learning outcomes. So then it both kind of teach anybody who isn't already
Yeah.
familiar with that is being taught that that's where you should start. I'm telling you what the learning outcomes should be, and then going into them in depth so that you know why that outcome, what do you need to consider as an
Yeah.
administrator, what activities are going to help them learn that outcome.
Hmm.
I'm glad that you said that because that's exactly what I was
Yeah.
going for.
Well, yeah, I had a very similar experience when I first started, working over here of a course that was like about how do you teach certain things, and I'm doing the comp ret thing over here, so it was like, how do you teach writing, in a course? And one of the first things I did was, or that they showed us, was the learning outcomes for like first year writing, for example.
Mhm.
And it's like, how do you design a course that hits all these points? And that was a very intuitive way to build out for me, because as long as I could find a way to connect what I was doing back to a learning outcome, it made sense. I had a way to figure out, was what I doing made sense? Well, does it connect to a learning outcome? And so I think that would be a very effective, initial grab for uh, uh, potential instructors or potential trainers who are interested in this. Is that it would give them a very clear way to see whether or not their ideas would or would not work in relationship to the material. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so
Awesome.
much. That's exactly what I needed to be able to move forward. I was just kind of stuck and I needed to double check that my organization made sense before I moved forward with continuing to revise within that organizational structure. So that helps so much. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, glad I could help. So, yeah, you talked about it a little bit. What do you plan to do moving forward with this?
So I'm going to keep playing around with the wording on these learning outcomes. And now that I know that that organization makes sense, then I can keep just revising within each of the sections and um, feeling confident that that
Mhm.
structure makes sense. So I can just move forward with keeping that organizational structure and making
Mhm.
sure things are clear within each of those sections.
I could spell organizational. Um, there we go. All right. Well, I created a little post-session agenda for you.
Oh,
So
great.
you have something that you can, it's there under my massive amounts of comments for the various notes I was taking. So it's at the bottom. So
I
you see
found
that.
it. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Well, thanks for coming in. If there's any other questions, feel free to let me know. If not, yeah, glad to help. Hope to see you again in the center sometime.
Yes. Thank you so much, Luke. Have a great
Yeah,
one.
you too.
Bye.
Take care.